ডঙ্গর ঝরণ জঙ্গল জনম মাটিকু কদাপি ছাড়িবু ନାହିଁ শপথ କରୁଛୁ ଜୀବନ ଦେବାକୁ ଲଢ଼େଇ ଛାଡ଼ିବୁ ନାହିଁ.
Hello. In part 2 we looked at the habit of termites and ants to build their mound on places where negative energy emanates from the earth due to telluric currents. Their whole insect business is about degrading the soil they live on and transform it, as is required for this old symbiosis they live in with the fungus called termitomyces. I attempted to show how the cyclical appearance of this fungus in connection with the monsoon season is an overlooked but important factor for survival to the hunter-gatherer and early farmer communities. A factor that may not only be overlooked but also may be misinterpreted by the larger part of the scientific and so-called pseudo-scientific communities who have interest in unraveling the past. By giving more examples, I hope to substantiate the claim that the anthill, mushroom and snake lay at the basis of some of this religious iconography and mythology we will find all around the world. Recently, I changed my perceptions of the narrative some people or groups promote regarding ancient symbology. For example, the idea that nearly all symbology originates in one unique celestial event, and like placing it in a not too distant past as well. On its own, not such a big problem. There are so many myths and legends on the Big Flood, for example, that are so similar you have to assume they are all adaptations from one story only. But to conclude that the reason for the wide dispersal of the underlying root story can only be explained by a single happening in the sky, because the sky would be the only place where people from all over the world could actually see it and record it. I think there's a bit of a logical fallacy in that. I can't help but ask myself what makes them promote a vision that excludes any other possible occurring mystery put down in the records of the ancients. Not the out-of-the-ordinary mystery, but the ever-present mystery of time, captured in days, in seasons, in the movements of sun, moon and stars, but also time captured in the cyclical manifestations of flora and fauna. Why should this mystery not be recorded in symbols and emphasized in ritual? What with unique events like some disasters like floodings or earthquakes or devastation through wildfires or giant meteors impacts that must have been traumatizing as well. There is no need for one particular rearrangement of the solar system. I mean, the collective amnesia oftentimes referred to is a bit of a stretch, considering the archaic images we as humanity are attracted to. The fact that we supposedly forgot about our collective past may be only due to uncountable efforts to rewrite history and the biased interpretation of symbology. Same for the overly romanticized, extrapolated use of hallucinogenic fungi as put forward by Terence McKenna in his book Food of the Gods and the Stoned Ape proponents. I think they may be displaying a bit of a tunnel vision in which the quote-unquote ordinary has no more value and all salvation needs to be found elsewhere, beyond the doors of perception in this case. It is not at all my intention to denounce their theories entirely, if that were even possible. All I want to do is open up some room for realities that are largely left out of their equations. I'm not going to try and figure out why they are doing that. When the iconography spreads along with the dispersal of the religious beliefs wherever people go, and as time moves on, symbols lose the connection with the original observation and experience. Despite this given, we still have some possibilities left to attempt and trace the origins of symbols, for example by comparing the traditions, the legends, the linguistics, and by using simple logic. Architecture can also be one of the tracks to follow. Termites and their mounds have been and still are subject to serious research. Their climate engineering not only allows them to thrive under arid conditions, but also makes the growth of a specific kind of mushroom possible, which bursts through the soil of the termitarium as soon as the first electric storms announce wet season. The way termites build their mounds largely depends on the climate of the area where they live. As it turns out, they adapt their architecture to a changing environment. As well for their fungi breeding rooms as for the offspring, they need to control ventilation and keep a stable inner moisture level and temperature, despite the large differences during night and day outside. Their genius climate control is an inspiration for modern sciences as they learn to emulate nature's time-tested patterns and strategies, a practice generally known as biomimicry. Although modern scientists seem to behave as if they found something novel in emulating nature's ways, there is strong indications this concept was established knowledge, a matter of course for the ancients. Although modern scientists seem to behave as if they found something novel in imitating nature's ways, there are strong indications this concept was established knowledge long time ago. It was a matter of course for the ancients. One example of early biomimicry may be the yakchal, a structure we can still find in Iran today. This refrigerator system has been in use in Persia since at least 800 BC and was described on a Sumerian tablet dating back halfway the 2nd millennium BC. There is quite some info out there describing the way the ventilation systems and the internal shape of the buildings provide a thermal effect assuring cooling of the contents. So one has to ask oneself if the design was actually inspired by nature's ways and more in particular by termite mounds. Whatever it may be, the yakchal and its wind catchers used to be integrated in an extensively used water distribution system named kanat. If you are interested in ancient technology, this is certainly something to read up on. These water management techniques have allowed African and Asian communities to flourish in times of drought. What we know about Petra's canals is less impressive compared to the immense distribution networks all along the Silk Road. Let's look at stupas. Stupa literally translate to heap. If you look at the names given to similar buildings in the Indian and East Asian regions like Dagoba, Pagoda, Shorten, Prachedi, Tat or To, and so on, they all refer to an enclosure containing a treasure, an offering, a precious And it is also compared to being a womb. I propose in part 1 that the anthill is a representation of the primordial mud, risen out of the primordial waters, on which the first vegetation grows. How the initial worship of a heap of earth as part of the Earth Mother transformed into a female deity and is replaced by a temple structure containing an anthropomorph relic. The womb concept in ancient architecture can be found all over Europe and Asia in the tumuli built by the ancestors. And so is the archaic image of the central tree or pillar connecting earth and sky, connecting the underworld and the heavens. Most of these religious buildings are provided with a central pinnacle. The symbolism connected with this pinnacle deserves a better look at than the one I will be giving here. The different forms stand for the elements basically, but there are variations in the explanations, and I cannot go into the specifics, or I will be at it at this series forever. What is important to me now is the specific shape of the top. It may be clear that the proposal of the iconic umbrella being based on the termites resonates for me. Until now, though, I was unaware of the specific shape of mound, which themselves look very much like mushrooms. Although these particular ones do not grow as large as the, say, cathedral mounds, they of course only underline the idea that I'm trying to put forward, namely that a termite mound, the mushroom and the snake are intrinsically connected in ancient worship, and this is reflected in religious symbology and architecture of today. The auspicious symbol of the white umbrella is called the Kshatri in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. India and Southeast Asia have the layered umbrella present in almost all religious temples and outside. The amount of layers depending on the status of the people or the relic to whom or what the building is dedicated. Umbrellas have become a symbol of nobility, and apparently 9 levels belong to royalty especially, and some sources mention these 9 levels represented the 9 levels in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, although I didn't look into that for now. Likely it stood model for the Shatra, an umbrella-like dome, independent or integrated into a larger structure. This shape is of course used in many cultures. It is also a part of the Christian symbology. A canopy like this was used by early Christians until the 4th century and was from then on replaced by basilicas, all of them containing the papal umbrella. Again, I want to emphasize the feminine character of this kind of church, because however you look at it, moist and dark Soma as moon-connected deity and counterpart of the fire god Agni, manifesting as vegetation growing on the primordial mud, or the worship of the ancient earth goddess as the white anthill, that is absorbed into one of the only female Buddhas carrying the white umbrella as her own symbol. I mean, there seems to be a tendency, no? There's lots of loose ends to be untangled and connected. There is much more. Over the ages, who still remembers the original shape that offered inspiration to the first architects in their decisions on how the first building of ceremony should be designed? Termites have been around for a very, very long time. They were around before the continents started drifting apart to evolve separately from each other. But compared to the ants, which came into existence much, much later than the termites hardly evolved genetically during those millions of years, whereas the ants have. They are older than the most insects, and their mounds arose long before the most flowers grew. They were they were the very first cathedral builders. Next to the consumption of termites, termite composed clay and water from underneath the mounds for medicinal purposes, there is evidence of the use of termite hills as kilns for ceramics or metallurgical furnace. These were found as well as in India as in Africa, going back as 8,000 years, or like Africa at least going back 4,000 years. And again, they are using this particular insect engineering, the shafts allowing perfect ventilation, and the mound itself or its clay being the perfect material, as it contains a lot of mineral and especially a lot of quartz. We can only speculate whether the early evidence is an actual proof for metallurgy, or if the slag that is found is a result of the minerals that termites built into their mounds. This video shows how to build a kiln using termitarium clay. He also gathers bog iron to melt in it. I will put a link underneath to this channel in the notes. Our ancestors ate termites 1 million years ago already, and some still do it until this day. It is safe to say the complete phenomena of these insects and their buildings had a big value in many ways, and looking at the sciences and arts, partially relying on their methods and or means, the value of the termites and their mounds remains. I mean, how archaic can an image be? It is totally unnecessary to explain the iconography through celestial events only, as proposed by some mythologists. The iconic mushroom symbol, like we see in the Indian as well as the Mesoamerican cultures, was in all probability based on mushrooms, plain and simple. I actually have a big problem with the total exclusion of down-to-earth phenomena in the pictographs, of which we assume they represent early religious symbology. If anything, it may have highlighted the importance of these fungi as a seasonal food source, medicine, and yes, as a mystical appearance of which ancient man could not fully explain its origin. That, together with the mysterious appearance of termite mounds containing gold and whatnot, and preferred by the snake to deposit their eggs. It may be thanks to this inherent lack of exclusionism of religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, in contrast to the chosen ones' exclusivity of Semite religions, that was the important factor which allowed the presence of these animistic concepts to be preserved in their own religious iconography, as proposed by Indologist Konrad Alst. Within animism, there is no need for representations or anthropomorphism, since the trees, the mounds, the animals all are representatives of divinity just the way they are. They are intelligent designs in themselves, expressions of omnipresent energy. The non-Semite religions of the Indian subcontinent has been much more tolerant towards other worldviews, absorbing their icons in a way that they are still recognizable. To me, the Hindu and Buddhist pantheon and their numerous stories are, as recorded in the Vedas, is an inextricable tangle, to be honest, but I see the repetition of the symbolism, and that is of importance to me. So when we look at the representation of Buddha sitting in deep meditation under an umbrella, we can still recognize that termitomyces in it. Opening one page on Google search, however, will direct to a number of sites and sources highlighting the connection between the mushroom-like appearance and soma, and then soma will be determined as being the elixir of life, as being an conscious or mind-expanding drink. Indeed, certain Buddhist texts mention the use of hallucinogenic mushrooms, especially what the ascetic yogi practice is concerned. But what is left out, though, is the fuller meaning of soma and the story on Buddha, for example, how he died, including that poisonous mushroom. Also, they forget to mention mushrooms were used as medicine for physical ailments. Swiftly, the proponents move to the South Americas, where there is a big amount of imagery of mushroom idols. Again, the focus is on the hallucinogenic properties, in particular those of the Amanita muscaria. Indeed, they have been used by the indigenous cultures throughout the ages, but not merely for tripping into other dimensions. When properly detoxified, and this is possible through a simple process using heat and vinegar, the fly agaric is perfectly consumable for its nutritional properties. The lack of this information in the writings of the romanticizers of drug use makes me suspect either plain naivety or even worse. Anyone who has seen the ease by which drug use evolves into drug abuse is in the least familiar with the consequences of this, and honestly knows very well there are dangers involved, and it is a dodgy path to follow when aiming for an altered conscious. Alteration does not automatically equal expansion, and it is falsehood to promote it like that. Despite the novelty and creativity displayed in the arguments for the stoned ape, the theory that has a lack of evidence and examples of tunnel vision prone to drug use. Just as there lacks evidence to assume that the depictions we find in several and distant cultures of antiquity point to nothing but the frequent or a general use of trip mushrooms. Although I will not argue against certain benefits from use of natural drugs, in specific cases. McKenna eventually admitted that the proposition in his book Food of the Gods was propaganda for his tune out agenda. It is not based on actual evidence or proper research. I could start a rant, or actually I'm ranting, on the impact of the drug cult in the 60s to this day, but enough of that already. Humans, among other animals, and mushrooms have a relation that goes back to their very origin. We tend to forget that when we buy mushrooms in the supermarket crammed into their typical plastic trays. And although it may be a start, wisdom is not something one accomplishes purely by eating mushrooms and altering perception. Since we have arrived in the Americas, let's proceed from there next time. Thank you for watching.